Richard Carter stood in his private veterinary clinic, his Italian leather shoes squeaking against the polished floor as he gazed at the three tiny puppies huddled together on the examination table. As one of America's most successful dog breeders, with a net worth of $50 million, he had built his reputation on breeding perfection. But these puppies, born to his prized champion show dog, were anything but perfect. The veterinarian's report lay open beside them, each page detailing yet another defect. The smallest puppy, golden-furred with a white heart-shaped patch, could barely stand. The middle one struggled for air, its tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The largest of the three suffered from severe infections in both eyes. The estimated cost for their medical treatment was more than what most people earned in a year. Richard's phone buzzed again, another message from the International Dog Show Committee. In just 2 months, they expected him to present his newest champions. These puppies, riddled with genetic defects and health complications, would ruin 15 years of meticulous breeding and a pristine reputation he had spent millions to create. Now 3 fragile lives threatened to undo everything. The smallest puppy lifted its head slightly, its innocent eyes meeting his. For the briefest moment, something flickered in Richard's cold gaze. Perhaps a memory of his own struggles before he built his empire. But business was business. Success demanded hard decisions, and he hadn't become a millionaire by letting emotions interfere with judgment. That evening, as his chauffeur navigated the outskirts of the city, Richard sat in the back seat, a cardboard box resting on his lap. The same box that once held his $1,000 shoes now carried 3 tiny lives. He had chosen this industrial area deliberately, far enough from security cameras but close enough to civilization that someone might find them. It was more mercy than they deserved, he told himself. The sun was nearly gone when Richard placed the box between 2 dumpsters. The smallest puppy whimpered, a weak, almost inaudible sound beneath the noise of evening traffic. Straightening his custom-made suit, he turned away. The autumn wind whispered through the alley, carrying a strange feeling in the air, almost as if promising that this was not the end of their story, but rather the beginning. His Rolls-Royce glided silently out of the lot, carrying him back to his mansion in the world of wealth he had carefully built. Richard Carter had no way of knowing that in exactly 1 year, these 3 puppies, whom he had discarded as worthless, would make national headlines, proving their worth in ways that would shake his carefully constructed world to its core. Sarah Chen wasn't supposed to be in the industrial district that night. The 16-year-old should have been on her usual bus ride home from her shift at the animal shelter, counting the coins in her pocket to see if she had enough for a warm meal. But then she heard it, a faint sound, barely carried on the wind, so soft she almost missed it. Something about it made her step away from the bus stop into the growing darkness. Working at the shelter had taught her about animals in distress, but something about these cries was different. They weren't the usual sounds of strays looking for food. These were the cries of creatures clinging to life itself. Each step away from the bus stop was a step away from safety, yet Sarah couldn't ignore what her heart was telling her. The industrial district loomed ahead like a maze of shadows. Her phone lit up with another missed call from her mother, the 5th one in the past hour. Sarah knew she would be in trouble, but she also knew she wouldn't be able to sleep if she ignored those desperate cries. 2 years of working with abandoned animals had taught her that sometimes minutes made the difference between life and death. When she finally found the box wedged between the dumpsters, her heart nearly stopped. 3 tiny puppies lay huddled together, barely moving. Their condition was worse than anything she had seen at the shelter. The smallest one, golden-furred with a unique white patch, opened its eyes slightly at her approach. The trust in that gaze, despite everything these puppies had endured, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Her mind raced with the impossible situation. The shelter was closed for the night. The emergency vet clinic required hundreds of dollars up front. Her family's small apartment had strict rules against pets, and her mother was already working double shifts just to pay the rent. But as Sarah knelt beside the box, she noticed something that made her gasp: the expensive logo on the cardboard. Someone hadn't just abandoned these puppies, they had thrown them away like unwanted merchandise. Without hesitation, Sarah shrugged off her only warm jacket, wrapping it gently around the freezing puppies. The smallest one nuzzled weakly against her hand, its body trembling with fever. The middle puppy's breathing was so labored, she could hear it in the quiet of the alley. The largest one's infected eyes were crusted shut, but it managed to lift its head slightly at her touch. Her phone rang again, her mother's worried face appearing on the screen. Sarah knew what waited at home: anger, punishment, maybe even tears. But as she carefully lifted the box, feeling the fragile lives within, she made a promise that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone these puppies would touch. "You're not worthless," she whispered, her voice strong despite her fears. "And I'm going to prove it." The weight of the box felt light in her arms, but the responsibility it represented pressed heavily on her shoulders. As Sarah began her long walk home through the darkening streets, she had no way of knowing that she wasn't just saving 3 abandoned puppies. She was setting in motion a miracle that would unfold over the next year, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with a single act of compassion. The 5-flight climb to their apartment had never felt longer. Sarah's arms ached from carrying the box, and each whimper from inside felt like a knife in her heart. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother's favorite evening drama playing on their small TV. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle, knowing the real drama was about to unfold in their tiny apartment. Ming Chen's face transformed from relief to confusion to shock as she took in the sight of her daughter. Jacket missing, tears in her eyes, clutching a battered cardboard box. But before any words could be spoken, the smallest puppy let out a cry so weak, so desperate, that it seemed to pierce the very air between mother and daughter. Ming's eyes widened as Sarah carefully set the box down, revealing its precious cargo. "Mama," Sarah whispered, switching to Mandarin as she always did in moments of deep emotion. "I know we can't afford it. I know we don't allow pets. But if we don't help them, they'll die." Her voice cracked on the last word, and in that moment, something changed in Ming's expression. 20 years of working as a nurse in China before immigrating to America had taught Ming Chen to act first and question later when lives were at stake. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she examined each puppy, her face growing more concerned with each discovery. "High fever," she muttered, feeling the smallest one's body. "Severe dehydration, infection." Her medical training, unused for years as she worked at the convenience store, suddenly became their greatest asset. Their tiny bathroom transformed into an emergency room. Ming's old medical supplies, carefully preserved from her nursing days, found new purpose as she showed Sarah how to clean the puppies' infected eyes and wounds. Their kitchen became a pharmacy as Ming mixed sugar water for the dehydrated pups, her memory reaching back to times when proper medical supplies weren't available. Hour after hour, they worked together in near silence, communicating through gestures and quick glances. The smallest puppy, whom they began calling Hope, fought for every breath. The middle one, Lucky, couldn't keep down the sugar water at first. Spirit, the largest, whimpered in pain as they cleaned his infected eyes. Dawn was breaking when Ming finally spoke more than basic instructions. "When I was a nurse," she said softly, cradling Hope against her chest, "I learned that sometimes the smallest patients have the strongest will to live." She looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and pride. "But saving these puppies, it will not be easy. We barely have enough for ourselves." Sarah watched as her mother gently stroked Hope's tiny head, the same way she used to stroke Sarah's hair when she was sick as a child. "There's something special about them, Mama," Sarah whispered. "I can feel it. They just need a chance." A soft knock at their door made both of them freeze. Through the thin walls, they could hear Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor and the building's unofficial watchdog. Ming looked at the illegal box of puppies, then at her daughter's pleading eyes, and made a decision that would change all their lives. Instead of hiding the puppies, she opened the door wide, revealing their emergency rescue operation to the notorious gossip of the building. Mrs. Jenkins stood there in her floral robe, mouth open to deliver what was surely a complaint about the night's commotion. But then Hope lifted her tiny head and let out a soft whimper that seemed to carry both gratitude and a plea for help. What happened next would become the first of many miracles these puppies would bring into their lives. Mrs. Jenkins stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth still open in what should have been a complaint. But as she took in the scene before her, Ming's medical supplies spread across the floor, Sarah's tear-stained face, and 3 tiny puppies fighting for life, something unexpected happened. Without a word, she turned and hurried back to her apartment, leaving Ming and Sarah holding their breath in dread. Minutes later, she returned with an armful of supplies. "I bred show cats for 30 years, she announced, pushing past them into the apartment. "These little ones need more than sugar water." From her bundle emerged powdered milk formula, eyedroppers, and soft blankets that still smelled of fabric softener. Her arthritis-gnarled hands moved with surprising gentleness as she showed them how to properly bottle feed such young puppies. Word spread through the building like a quiet wildfire. By midday, their tiny apartment had become the heart of an impromptu rescue operation. Mr. Rodriguez from the 3rd floor, who worked as a janitor at the veterinary clinic, smuggled in antibiotics and proper medical supplies. The twins from the 2nd floor donated their allowance money for puppy formula. Even gruff old Mr. Chen, no relation, from the 1st floor, who always complained about noise, arrived with heating pads he'd bought from the pharmacy. But it was the puppies themselves that truly began to work magic on the building's residents. Despite their weakness, they showed an extraordinary will to live. Hope, the smallest, would nuzzle against anyone who helped feed her, as if offering thanks. Lucky, though, still struggling to keep food down, wagged his tail at every visitor. Spirit, once his eyes began to clear, watched everyone with an intelligence that seemed far beyond his few weeks of life. Ming's medical knowledge, dormant for years as she worked at the convenience store, flourished again as she coordinated their care. She created detailed charts tracking each puppy's progress, taught the neighbors proper feeding techniques, and organized round-the-clock monitoring schedules. For the first time since leaving her nursing career behind in China, she moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Sarah's role at the animal shelter took on new meaning as she applied everything she learned there to help the puppies. Her volunteer coordinator, noticing her increased dedication, began teaching her more advanced care techniques. Each small victory, the first time Hope stood on her own, Lucky's first proper meal, Spirit's eyes fully opening, was celebrated by the entire building. As days turned into weeks, the puppies grew stronger. Their fur began to shine, their eyes brightened, and their personalities emerged more clearly. Hope, true to her name, never gave up trying to walk normally, despite her weak legs. Lucky seemed to know exactly when someone feeling down needed puppy kisses. Spirit showed an uncanny ability to alert Ming whenever one of his siblings needed attention. But it wasn't just the puppies who were transforming. The building, once full of closed doors and suspicious neighbors, had become a community. People who had lived next to each other for years without speaking now gathered in the Chen's apartment to help with feedings and share stories. The puppies had awakened something in all of them, a reminder that sometimes the most precious gifts come in the most unexpected packages. 1 month into their journey, as Sarah watched Mrs. Jenkins bottle-feeding Hope while teaching the twins proper puppy care techniques, she realized something extraordinary was happening. These puppies, abandoned because they were deemed worthless, were already changing lives. But what no one in that small apartment could know was that these early changes were just the beginning. The real miracle, the one that would make headlines and shake a millionaire's world, was still to come. 6 months had passed since that fateful night of the rescue. Though still smaller than normal dogs their age, the puppies had grown into something extraordinary. The first sign that they were truly special came on a quiet Sunday morning at the local park, where Sarah had begun taking them for short walks. Hope, despite her initially weak legs, had developed a peculiar ability that no one could explain. During their morning walk, an aggressive German Shepherd broke free from its owner, charging toward a group of children playing nearby. Before anyone could react, Hope, the smallest of the three, placed herself between the charging dog and the children. Instead of barking or showing fear, she simply stood there, her golden eyes fixed on the larger dog. To everyone's amazement, the German Shepherd stopped in its tracks, whimpered, and lay down submissively. The incident might have been dismissed as a coincidence if similar events hadn't kept happening. At the shelter where Sarah volunteered, the staff began noticing that the most aggressive dogs would mysteriously calm down whenever Hope was nearby. The shelter director, initially skeptical, started placing Hope near the kennels of troubled dogs. One by one, dogs that had been deemed unadoptable began showing remarkable improvements in behavior. Spirit, the largest of the three, revealed his gift in an even more dramatic way. During one of their evening walks, he suddenly pulled Sarah toward the park's unused maintenance shed. There they found Mr. Chen, who had suffered a diabetic episode and collapsed while taking out his trash. More surprisingly, Spirit had started alerting the elderly man to his dropping blood sugar levels, even before his medical alert device would sound. Lucky, true to his name, displayed an uncanny ability to find lost things and people. When the twins lost their father's precious war medal, Lucky led them straight to it, buried under a pile of leaves in the park. When a child went missing from the neighborhood playground, Lucky tracked her to a hidden corner behind some bushes where she had fallen asleep. The building's residents, who had helped nurse the puppies back to health, watched in amazement as these abilities emerged. Mrs. Jenkins, with her years of experience with show animals, insisted she had never seen anything like it. "These aren't just dogs," she would say, her eyes glistening with tears. "They're angels sent to remind us what really matters." Ming observed all of this with quiet wonder. Her medical training told her to be skeptical, to look for logical explanations, but she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The puppies seemed to possess an intelligence and awareness that went beyond normal animal behavior. They didn't just respond to commands, they anticipated needs, sensed dangers, and somehow knew exactly who needed their help most. Word began to spread beyond their neighborhood. Local pet owners started bringing their troubled dogs to the park, hoping Hope could help calm them. Families with elderly relatives asked if Spirit could visit, trusting his ability to sense medical issues. Lost pet posters now included requests for Lucky's tracking abilities. Sarah kept detailed records of every incident, every surprising display of their abilities. As the months passed, the evidence became undeniable. These three puppies, once abandoned and left to die, possessed gifts that no one could explain. But even as their reputation grew, Sarah felt that they were building towards something even more extraordinary. What nobody realized was that they were approaching a milestone that would change everything. In just a few more months, exactly 1 year from their abandonment, these three puppies would do something so remarkable that it would make headlines across the country and force a certain millionaire to confront the true meaning of value. As the 1-year anniversary of the puppies' rescue approached, their reputation had grown far beyond the neighborhood. Local news stations began running stories about the miracle dogs of East Side. Hope had helped rehabilitate over 50 aggressive dogs at the shelter, turning them from unadoptable to family pets. Spirit had detected early signs of medical emergencies in 12 different cases, saving lives that might have been lost without his warning. Lucky had reunited 15 lost pets with their families and helped locate 3 missing children. The attention brought both opportunities and challenges. The local veterinary hospital offered free lifetime care for the puppies, amazed by their abilities. Researchers from the city university requested permission to study their unique gifts. Even a famous dog trainer arrived from Los Angeles, hoping to feature them in a documentary about extraordinary animals. Sarah and Ming handled the growing attention carefully, never accepting money for the puppies' help. "Their gifts aren't for sale," Ming would say firmly, remembering their own struggles and wanting to help others in need. Their small apartment became a gathering place for people seeking hope, healing, and help. The puppies seemed to understand the importance of their role, working tirelessly to assist everyone who came to them. But it was a small article in the city newspaper that changed everything. A reporter had written a feature story about Hope's work with aggressive dogs, including a photo of her with her distinctive white heart-shaped patch. The article described how she had been found abandoned in the industrial district exactly 1 year ago, along with her 2 siblings who showed equally remarkable abilities. Richard Carter was sitting in his luxury office when he saw the article. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the imported marble floor as he stared at Hope's photograph. The white heart-shaped patch was unmistakable, the same marking he had last seen in a cardboard box behind those dumpsters. His hands shook as he read about their achievements, each word a damning testament to his terrible mistake. The timing couldn't have been worse for Richard. His kennel's reputation had been soaring, with his show dogs winning championships across the country. He had just been featured in Elite Breeder magazine as the most successful dog breeder in America. The article even quoted him saying, "Only perfect specimens can produce champions. There's no room for weakness in breeding excellence." As the one-year mark drew closer, the puppies began showing signs that something extraordinary was building. Hope became even more attuned to troubled animals, now able to calm them from greater distances. Spirit's medical detection abilities grew sharper, sensing problems earlier than ever before. Lucky's tracking skills extended beyond finding lost things. He could now locate people and animals he had never met before, guided by some inexplicable sense. The night before the anniversary of their abandonment, an unexpected storm hit the city. As rain pounded against windows and thunder shook buildings, the three puppies became unusually alert. Something was coming. Something that would shake the foundations of everything people thought they knew about the value of life, the meaning of perfection, and the power of compassion. What happened the next day would not only make headlines across the country, but would force a millionaire to confront the consequences of his actions in a way that nobody could have predicted. The miracle that had been building for a year was about to reveal itself, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary power comes from those who were once deemed worthless. Exactly 1 year after their abandonment, the city was struck by the worst disaster in its history. A massive fire broke out at the Central Children's Hospital, trapping dozens of young patients on the upper floors. As smoke filled the corridors and flames blocked conventional escape routes, the city watched in horror as firefighters struggled to reach the children. Sarah and Ming had brought the three puppies to the hospital that morning for their usual therapy visits with young patients. As the fire alarms blared, something extraordinary happened. Something that would be captured on security cameras and witnessed by hundreds, leaving no doubt about the miracle that unfolded. Hope, Spirit, and Lucky, who had been in different parts of the hospital, suddenly converged in the main lobby. Standing in a perfect triangle, they began to glow with a soft golden light. Security footage would later show them raising their heads in perfect unison, releasing a harmonious sound that seemed to ripple through the entire building. In that moment, every panicked child in the hospital suddenly became calm. More incredibly, every service dog and therapy animal in the building began moving in coordinated patterns, leading children and staff to safe passages that even the firefighters hadn't discovered. But the true miracle came when the three puppies made their way to the most dangerous part of the hospital, where 5 children remained trapped. As firefighters and rescue workers watched in awe, the air around the puppies began to shimmer. The flames themselves seemed to bend away from their path, creating a safe corridor through the inferno. Hope led the way, her calming presence keeping the children from panicking. Spirit, with his medical intuition, identified which children needed immediate oxygen. Lucky, using his extraordinary sense of direction, found the safest route through the chaos. Richard Carter, who had been driving past the hospital, witnessed the entire scene. 1 year ago to the day, he had abandoned these puppies, believing they were worthless. Now he watched as they coordinated the most successful rescue operation the city had ever seen. Not a single life was lost that day, despite what fire officials would later call unsurvivable conditions. The security footage went viral instantly. National news networks ran the story nonstop. 3 abandoned puppies, exactly 1 year after being left to die, had saved an entire hospital of children. Experts studied the footage but could find no explanation for how the puppies had created safe passages through the flames, or how they had managed to coordinate every therapy animal in the building into an effective rescue force. As Richard Carter stepped forward from the crowd, the 3 puppies turned to face him. In front of dozens of news cameras and hundreds of witnesses, the millionaire who had once thrown them away knelt before them. 1 year ago today, he announced, his voice shaking, I abandoned these puppies because they weren't perfect enough for my breeding standards. Today they proved that true perfection isn't about appearance or pedigree, it's about the size of one's heart and the courage to help others. The most remarkable part wasn't just the rescue, it was how the puppies had combined their individual gifts into something greater. Hope's ability to calm others, Spirit's medical intuition, and Lucky's guidance skills had merged into a power that defied explanation. They hadn't just saved lives, they had demonstrated that when pure hearts work together, the impossible becomes possible. The media dubbed it the Miracle of 3, and the date became known as Second Chance Day in the city. But for Sarah and Ming, who had believed in these puppies from the start. It was simply the day the world finally saw what they had known all along, that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come in the most unexpected packages. In the months following the miracle at Morrison Park, the impact of the three puppies' story rippled across the country. Richard Carter transformed his prestigious kennel into the nation's largest rehabilitation center for special needs dogs. The same facilities that once housed only champion show dogs now welcomed animals others had given up on. Each kennel bore a plaque with the words, "Every life has value." Sarah and Ming moved into a small house with a big yard, courtesy of Richard's foundation. But they insisted on keeping their jobs, Ming at the convenience store and Sarah at the shelter, because these places had become centers of community healing. Hope, Spirit, and Lucky continued their work, now officially certified as therapy dogs, specializing in different areas. Hope trained other dogs to become emotional support animals. Spirit worked with medical alert dog programs, and Lucky helped search and rescue teams. The apartment building where it all began became a model for community care. Mrs. Jenkins started a program teaching elderly residents how to foster abandoned animals. The twins began a youth volunteer group at the shelter. Even gruff Mr. Chen opened a pet supply section in his small grocery store, with all profits going to animal rescue efforts. But perhaps the most profound change was in how people viewed imperfection. Applications to adopt special needs pets soared across the country. The story of three abandoned puppies who became heroes reminded everyone that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. 1 year after the miracle, Richard Carter stood in the park where everything had changed. Beside him, three healthy dogs played with neighborhood children, still smaller than average, but radiating an inner strength that no breeding standard could measure. As he watched Hope calm a frightened child, Spirit alert a diabetic teenager about dropping blood sugar, and Lucky guide a lost elderly man back to his family, Richard finally understood what true value meant. Today, in shelters across our country, thousands of animals wait for someone to see their true worth. They may not all possess miraculous abilities, but each one has the power to change lives in their own unique way. Every abandoned pet has the potential to transform not just a family, but an entire community. Remember Hope, Spirit, and Lucky's story. They prove that what we often see as flaws can become extraordinary gifts. Their journey from abandoned puppies to community heroes wasn't just a miracle. It was a wake-up call to look deeper, to give second chances, and to recognize that true value lies in the heart. You don't need to wait for a miracle to make a difference. Visit your local animal shelter today. Maybe you'll find your own Hope, Spirit, or Lucky waiting there. Every adoption gives an animal the chance to reveal their true worth. Every act of compassion creates ripples that can transform communities. Be the person who sees the potential in those others have abandoned. Be the one who gives them a chance to prove their worth. Because sometimes the most precious gifts come in packages that others might overlook. Visit your local shelter or rescue organization today. Your miracle is waiting.